Dark Souls is a series that means a lot to me, which is probably something you've heard a lot from many videos on this site, and to be honest, that's for a very good reason. It's an amazing franchise that not only influenced the industry as a whole, but also the people who played it. I am one of those people. Dark Souls made a huge impact on my life at a very important time. I first got into it during the end of secondary school, and if you know anything about secondary schools in the UK, they're pretty fucking miserable. I was at one of the lowest points of my life with an insane amount of stress from upcoming tests and personal issues. The only reason why I pushed through this awful shit was because of Dark Souls. Being able to overcome these insane odds and challenges in such a miserable, awful world that at the time mirrored my own, it gave me hope to keep pushing on forwards, facing these challenges head on, which led me to where I am today. These feelings were from all three Dark Souls games, as I played through them all in the same year, and since it's Dark Souls I'm specifically talking about here, it means I won't be including Sekiro, Bloodborne, or Elden Ring in this video. I'm going to be focusing on the Dark Souls games only. The first Dark Souls game I finished was the third one, and I have to thank it for truly getting me into the series. At that point in my life, I would have said it was my favourite one, until I look back at the first Souls game I actually ever played. The one that I put down because I found it way too hard at the time, and that was the original Dark Souls, which to this day, I consider my favourite game of all time, which is a very bold statement considering Bloodborne exists, but I don't see that shit in my Steam library, so shut up. It's one of the few games I constantly come back to. I mean, to be fair, I do with all the Souls games, but I think I've played through this one the most. I would consider it the best in the series, and the more time goes by, I might even say it's the only good Dark Souls game. Now hear me out, put your torches and pitchforks down, chill out, take a sip of Sneak Energy, link in the description, and listen to what I have to say. Dark Souls 1 is the best one out of the 3 games in my opinion. You can't hurt me now, the opinion shield is up. You let your guard down while I was talking about Sneak Energy, so now you can't complain. Dark Souls 3 is good in its own ways, like with its boss fights. It has some of the best in the series, it isn't a bad game at all, I just think it relies way too much on fan service from Dark Souls 1. And the combat is way too fast paced like Bloodborne, making it kind of feel like a weird hybrid of Bloodborne and Dark Souls 1 stitched together, which should be peak, but I don't know, it just kind of feels hollow. Then there's Dark Souls 2, which is just, man, I don't know what's really redeemable about Dark Souls 2, honestly. I mean, I do like the game, but I genuinely cannot think of a single good thing about it. I like the firearm armor that was introduced in Dark Souls 2. Yeah, that's the best thing about it. I just don't think FromSoftware are good at creating sequels. They're the best at making original IPs that expand on different mechanics from their previous games. And Dark Souls 1 is among the ranks with these, because it's a new IP after what they learnt from Demon Souls. And honestly, the original Dark Souls is a perfect example of what the Dark Souls experience truly is. I'm not gonna waste your time here talking about the game's history and shit, because you already know what Dark Souls is. Even your grandma knows what Dark Souls is. Oh fuck. It's okay, she'll respawn at a bonfire. Where the fuck am I? There's a multitude of things that I think Dark Souls 1 does better than the other games in the series. And the first thing is the atmosphere. Dark Souls 2 and 3 do not compare to the first game in terms of atmosphere. Like in 3, there's this washed out look to absolutely everything, and not in a good depressing way like it's supposed to be. It just feels like they forgot to turn up the saturation. Then there's Dark Souls 2, aside from the hub area in Majula, everything looks like complete shit. But there's many different reasons as to why this is the case for Dark Souls 2. Because before launch it was supposed to expand on the atmosphere of Dark Souls 1, expanding on the whole dark part of Dark Souls, and it would have been amazing. But you know, console limitations, blah blah blah. But I mean, even if it did have it, Dark Souls 1 just takes the atmospheric cake. Like, I'm not exaggerating when I say the atmosphere physically oozes out of your monitor while you play it. It's a grey, horrible ooze because Dark Souls 1 is fucking miserable, and I love that. Every single area you explore is just dark, dingy, and horrible, and the lack of music really adds to this, creating this thick, oppressive atmosphere that weighs on you as you explore every unknown area. Even in the place you start in, the Undead Asylum, it's this horrific prison where you've just been left to rot. And even the one guy who saves you and might give you a sense of hope ends up dying 5 minutes later. This is Oscar, and he is my best friend for the 5 minutes he's alive. So once you get through the Undead Asylum, you're taken to the hub of Dark Souls, and it's one of the only places with music. This is Firelink Shrine, and it's the only place you can even consider safe in this world. The music has this somber feel to it. Like, it doesn't bring you hope at all. You still feel that oppressive hopelessness, but it gives you a bit of comfort when you hear it. There are things that happen in the game that amplify the impact of Firelink Shrine, but we'll get to that later down the line. You explore a vast array of different places in Dark Souls 1, and every single one has a distinct look and feel to it. You got a place like Blighttown, these underground slums built underneath a sewer system from the Undead Burg, and around every corner of this shithole you feel like you could catch all kinds of diseases you didn't even know existed. Just above Blighttown is the Depths, which is the sewer system I mentioned a few seconds ago, and despite the fact these two areas are so close to each other, they are both visually distinct. Like, look at this, I've put them both together. Not to mention you can actually see a lot of these places from the other areas, even if they are completely different visually. It makes the world of Lordran feel like a living, breathing world, and it's all thanks to the level design. Dark Souls level design is literally perfect. Well, at least for the first half of the game. Who allowed this? The world of Lordran is all intertwined and it just doesn't feel like a game world whatsoever. This shit is so natural it feels real, I'm not exaggerating. It's so interconnected that you can access endgame areas from Firelink Shrine, which a lot of people have done before. If you stopped playing Dark Souls because of the skeletons in the graveyard, I hate to break it to you, but that's the wrong way. I had a friend who actually stuck with that direction at the start of the game, and he made it all the way down the catacombs to Tomb of the Giants. Bear in mind, these areas have enemies that would one-shot you at this point, and he was just met with a giant golden fog wall he couldn't even get past at the end of his journey. Oh, and there isn't fast travel at this point in Dark Souls 1, so he had to walk all the way back out again, which he did. Shout out to him. The lack of fast travel in the early game is a genuine blessing in my opinion. It allows the level design to truly shine. The lack of fast travel meant the level designers had to plan around being able to get back to certain areas like Firelink Shrine naturally, and fairly easily through shortcuts you find through the world. The first area you need to trudge through is Undead Burg, which is an amazing first area to explore. Enemies aren't too tough, but they aren't easy either, giving you a fair challenge. Not to mention the optional endgame enemies you can fight to acquire pretty good items. Once you learn the parry, these Black Knights are some of the easiest motherfuckers you can fight. Once you reach the top of Undead Burg, which on a first playthrough is quite a treacherous task, making you tackle shit like the Taurus Demon and that boar you give a rectal examination with your big ass sword with. At the top, what's waiting for you is the Bell Gargoyles, which again for a new player is a huge ass roadblock. They don't mess around. Within the cathedral you fight them on, you find a random elevator off to the side, and as you go down it, you wonder what horrors await you. Then you see this text appear, and the music slowly creeps in, and you get possibly one of, if not the best feelings you've ever had playing a game. I'm not even joking here, this one lift alone is a better experience than most games, just because of the feeling Dark Souls invokes. The difficulty and length of areas give those slight moments of safety that much more impact. This isn't the only example I can give, there are so many cases of the world looping back in on itself, but another I do want to mention is the walk back from Blighttown. Although it has the same objective as the Undead Burg, having you ring a bell, the trek down to Blighttown is far longer and much more of an intimidating journey than through Undead Burg. After the gargoyles you get a key that lets you go down to Lower Undead Burg, an entirely different area of the Undead Burg with stronger enemies, annoying ass dogs, and the biggest piece of shit asshole twatty bitch asshole idiot motherfucker, the Capra Demon. I will get to him and the other bosses later, just know he drops a key that gives you access to the Undead Burg sewer system, the Depths. The Depths is something that feels completely different to everything else you've experienced so far. You're entering a dark, underground, dingy area with new threats, and one of those threats is one of the worst things you'll ever experience in the game.
You hang up that computer call, come over here and kiss me on my hot mouth. I'm feeling romantical.
Once you get through it, you end up in Blighttown, which is the Depths but amplified. You physically cannot get through this place without getting poisoned.
Why am I poisoned? Why am I toxic?
At the bottom of Blighttown, you have to trudge through a poison swamp and make your way into Quaelag's domain, and after beating her, you ring the second bell. After doing so, it hits you. There isn't any fast travel in this game. How the fuck are you supposed to get back up to the surface? The journey down to the second bell has been so long and horrific. Surely they won't make you go back the exact same way. Well, you can go back the exact same way, and I can imagine many people have done so to their own detriment. But while you're in the swamp in Blighttown, you spot this weird wheel going up, and you can actually go up it. And you notice this cave leading out of there, leading to a brand new area called Valley of the Drakes. And then you spot a small little door leading into another area called New Londo Ruins. You take a random elevator back up, desperately looking for a bonfire. But just as you're about to reach the top, that familiar track kicks in again. You're back at Firelink Shrine. This shit is masterclass level design, and you want to know something even better about it? If you know about this back entrance to Blighttown, you can actually get there earlier. If you start the game with the master key, you can open up the gate in New Londo Ruins straight away and go down into Blighttown. But remember, this is the back entrance, meaning you can complete your objective of ringing the second bell without having to go through Lower Undead Burg, the depths, and the majority of Blighttown itself. I actually did this on my first playthrough by accident, because you can access Valley of the Drakes through another route in Darkroot Basin, which is connected onto Undead Burg as an alternative route if you're struggling with the gargoyles. I took this route, and I remember seeing the Blighttown text and being filled with dread, only to go down to the swamp, and I wondered instantly what everyone was complaining about, not being aware that I've completely missed 3 entire areas of the game. This type of level design takes balls. I don't know any other game that does this. Not even the sequels do anything remotely like this. The closest game is Elden Ring, but that's an open world game, so that doesn't count. After ringing the 2 bells, the only area to go is Sen's Fortress, and at the top of it you get an amazing shot of the best area in the entirety of Dark Souls. Anor Londo. What I've talked about is the first half of the game. After Anor Londo, it does kind of shit the bed with its level design, with linear branching paths that just end in a dead end, similar to future Dark Souls games level design. It's probably why you're given access to fast travel after this point, but you know what? I don't actually mind the second half of Dark Souls. Sure, it's not anywhere near as amazing as the first half, but seriously, what the hell even is at this point? The second half still has a lot of merits. Aside from Lost Isleif, that place is objectively god-awful. It just reeks of rushed development. At this point of the game, you're tasked with getting 4 Lord Souls, taking you down 4 visually distinct areas. And these areas remind me of traditional Zelda dungeons, which I have a huge soft spot for. Now, the main reason why it reminds me of Zelda dungeons is because of the distinct theming, along with the fact finding the 4 Lord Souls reminds me of something like getting the 4 giants from defeating the dungeon bosses in Majora's Mask. Even the areas have a form of mini-boss you have to fight before getting to one of the lords, similar to how it would work in a Zelda dungeon. Sometimes even giving you a specific item that helps you fight that specific lord. Honestly, this is a pretty stupid comparison to make, but I do hope you know what I mean and I'm not just blabbing on like a complete and utter twat. My favourite area of these 4 is the Duke's Archives, because of one section to be specific. The lord in the area is Seath the Scaleless, and he's a crafty fucker. He acts as the mini-boss in the start of the Archives, although the catch is, he's immortal and he kills you very quickly knowing you were coming to steal his soul. He knows how you pesky chosen undeads work though, knowing you respawn at bonfires.
Who the fuck are you?
And he has a special bonfire just for you to respawn at after he beats your ass. It's one in a nice comfy jail cell. He also made sure you couldn't warp from the bonfire either, so you are trapped. Something like this never happens again in the series. I just wanted to point out this entire section because it gets better. You obviously break out of the jail cell and you're spotted instantly by a snake person who rings an alarm. Doing so releases these horrific blue tentacle monsters that start scaling the staircase straight towards you. Now, the obvious thing to do would be to run the other way, and when you do, you get to a door, and then you realize it's locked. The key for the door is at the bottom, meaning you have to go all the way down and fight through all of those horrible specimens. It's awesome. It's a shame that Seath is kind of a shitty boss. In fact, I would say that the bosses in Dark Souls 1 aren't really the strongest point of the game. There are more air bosses than amazing ones, but the ones that are good are iconic. Most of the air ones rely on you having a good poise, negating stagger, allowing you to just tank attacks and smack the bosses around, which just isn't really that fun. Either that or the boss is so big you just can't really tell what the fuck is going on while fighting it. Then of course there's the Bed of Chaos, which could be considered one of, if not the worst bosses in the entire franchise. Oh great, I fucking fell again. Time to walk all the way back through Lost Isleif to fight it. These bad bosses make the good bosses that much more outstanding. Just before the halfway point, you have to fight Big and Small, the iconic duo Ornstein and Smo. For the first time ever, you have to fight two bosses at once. And this is Dark Souls, remember. The other boss doesn't wait around for you to finish off the other one politely like in an Arkham game. They both just go for you all at once, and you need to completely take advantage of where you are in the arena, and where they are, and what moves they're pulling off. Even outside of Dark Souls, you have more than likely seen these two. They are beyond iconic. Out of all the bosses in the base game, Ornstein and Smo are the only ones that I'd call outstanding. The others are either good, passable, or just plain god-awful. That's only in the base game though, because if we were to include the DLC, which I'm gonna be doing here because you can't really buy a version of Dark Souls 1 without it anymore, the outstanding bosses increase by quite a bit. For starters, let's talk about Artorias of the Abyss, which I think is where FromSoftware finally started to understand what makes their bosses so amazing. Artorias does not give you a second to breathe. You need to constantly be on your toes as he's dashing and flipping around the arena. There are small openings for you to hit him or heal yourself, but these moments are so tight you need to know exactly when you can get away with it. Then after Artorias, we have Manus, Father of the Abyss, who has the same formula as Artorias with tight windows, but these ones are even tighter. About as tight as your clenched arse while fighting him. Now you probably recall me saying how there are more average to bad bosses than good bosses in Dark Souls 1, and with the video title you're probably quite confused. Well, in Dark Souls 2, it's only average to bad bosses. There aren't really any good ones in my opinion. Dark Souls 3 are some of the best bosses in this series though, but everything else about it just brings it down compared to Dark Souls 1. In fact, it wishes it was Dark Souls 1. Even some of the bosses are just fan service from the original game. There's even some fan service in Dark Souls 2 that's just plain stupid. They all just want to be Dark Souls 1, what can I say? This video is very subjective and it's all just my personal opinion. There's a saying that your favourite Dark Souls game is the first one you ever played. And while Dark Souls 3 was the first one I ever finished, Dark Souls 1 was the first one I ever played back in 2014. Obviously I do still like Dark Souls 2 and 3 despite everything I've said, and of course the title, but you all know the YouTube game, you gotta clickbait a bit to get anywhere. Anyway, I hope you've all had a good time watching, and I'd like to know what you all think in the comments. Which of the 3 Souls games are your favourite and why? I'd love to know.